Work till May the 29th. President Buhari orders his ministers to go back to their offices, refuses to dissolve cabinet. A few days to leave office. President Buhari writes Senate and seeks approval to settle judgment debt. The Lagos State Governorship Election Tribunal dismisses APM and APP petitions against Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu. And also coming up on Politics HQ tonight, Algerian prominent opposition figure Karim Tabu arrested again. Liberia's House of Representatives to begin a budget performance report hearing for the fiscal years 2022 and 2023. We have 5 days left to the end of this administration to wind down, and tonight on Politics HQ we will be assessing President Muhammadu Buhari's 8 years in office. To have this discussion with me, I have my guest barrister Kingsley Chime, a political analyst. I have in the studio in Lagos here with me Dr. John, also a political analyst, and Dr. Jide Johnson, public affairs analyst. Stay with us, Politics HQ. We'll be right back. Now, at his inauguration, President Muhammadu Buhari made the popular quote, "I belong to everybody and I belong to nobody." That statement became one of the president's many performance indicators, but nearly 8 years since that day, a lot has changed or not. In a few days, President Muhammadu Buhari will leave office, and there have been many reactions to his style of governance and performance in office. President Buhari 8 years ago promised Nigerians to deliver in the areas of economy, security, and also to improve the lives of the hundreds of millions plus Nigerians. While security may look to have improved, there are still teething issues, including the healthcare sector and many other areas of Nigeria's lives. Now, joining me live for this discussion, I have Kingsley Chime, a political analyst, joins us live from Lagos. I also have Dr. John and also Dr. Jide Johnson, a public affairs analyst. A warm welcome to you, gentlemen, and thanks for joining us on PHQ tonight. I'd like to start with Kingsley. Now, Kingsley, looking at the past 8 years, the Buhari administration claims to have achieved extraordinary results across various sectors. Can you kindly provide a detailed overview of these achievements and their impact on the Nigerian society? How do they measure up to the promises the president made during his campaign?
Thank you so much, Wenga, for having me, and good evening, viewers. Of course, Buhari has the right, it's within his right actually, to assess, have an opinion about the assessment of his government. Of course, you do not expect a teacher to mark himself very lowly. So he, as someone who is at the helm of affairs, has scored himself very high. But when you consider the promises being made and what is on ground, the key performance, what I would call the key performance indices of this government, you would agree with me that President Buhari has actually failed the real sense of it. I don't want to, be pretentious about it. First and foremost, Buhari rode to power on the mantra of fighting corruption, providing jobs, insecurity, education, health, and so on and so forth. But when you look critically into this government from 2015 up until today, we would see that it is not all rosy. First, on the issue of corruption, of course, President Buhari started quite well with some policies like TSA at the material time, which eventually turned out that agencies like Nigerian NMPC was not captured in that arrangement. We also had policy of a whistleblowing policy, which was part of the earliest policies of this government, that saw the what they term Ikoyi Gate, where certain sums of money was discovered in an apartment in Ikoyi, Lagos. And up until now, nothing has been said about the owners of those monies. So these were interesting policies of government which never saw the light of the day. We also had the issue of the chairperson of the Economic and Financial Crime Commission at the time, Mr. Magu, who was also accused of corruption. There was a panel to investigate. Up until now, as we speak, the outcome of that panel has not been made public, and so on and so forth. So when you said you have done very well, we begin to interrogate some of these issues. And when you do that critically, you will see that this government, with due respect, has performed abysmally. You also look at an issue of insecurity. At the material time when President Muhammadu Buhari took over in 2015, of course, I agree that the places like Northeast were under serious attack of Boko Haram. He has tried as minimally to decimate that, but on a larger scale, we also saw other arms of insecurity like unknown gunmen, the banditry, the kidnapping, and so on and so forth that has also been happening all over the country. So how do you now begin to assess President Buhari's 8 years in government and then give him a pass mark on the issue of insecurity? Now we move to economy. Of course, we are aware that 2020 saw the decline in oil revenue globally, and it also affected the Nigeria economy. But Nigeria went into a recession twice under President Buhari's notes. You know,
we'll get into the details of those sectors that you mentioned in the course of our conversation. And I do believe we should have enough time to make justice of all of that. But I'd like to bring in Dr. Johnson into the conversation. Now, Dr. Johnson, national security has been a major concern in Nigeria. And when Nigerians voted for President Buhari, in being a former general, they thought, you know, he will be firm on security, that the hood would actually make the monk this time. Can you elaborate on the specific strategies and measures implemented by the Buhari administration in addressing security challenges in the country, and how effective have these measures been? And also, what is the current state of security in Nigeria as we speak at this moment?
Well, have you gotten the report for the Kuje prison breakout? There's nothing that has come out of that. What the administration has done is a self-fulfilling prophecy to score itself a pass mark for what it has done in the last 8 years. And I like the opening remark by my colleague when he did the sectoral analysis, because what we need to do in order to score this government is to do an overarching sectoral analysis, sector by sector analysis, and then you begin to evaluate and measure the performance of this particular administration. With respect to the question which you asked me in regards to security, you know, Buhari came into power based on the base of fighting insecurity. Well, like my colleague pointed out earlier, we've seen that we were dealing with insurgency. The government failed to term the Boko Haram as terrorists. Then we moved to banditry, and then we had kidnapping. And I've challenged over time that the president, without the paraphernalia of his office, to travel to Katsina, to travel to Daura, his home state. And the president, in an acknowledgement of what is really the situation of the security situation in Nigeria, said that if Nigeria should attack him, Republic of Benin, the Niger Republic would defend him. You recall that while he was still in opposition, his vehicle was attacked in Kano, that he almost lost his life. And a lot of Nigerians felt, okay, if we bring in a former general, we'll be able to deal with the security challenges which we are having. Across the length and breadth of Nigeria, who can travel by road? Not even the president, over time, I've challenged the Speaker of the House of Rep to travel from Abuja to Lagos without flying, and I've challenged the Senate President in person of Senator Lawan, to travel to UB without flying. Just let him travel to UB. So the security situation in Nigeria is not what it was in 2015. If you have to put a rating to it, we say that we are now at red alert, because no Nigerian can feel safe.
Okay, Dr. Johnson, we seem to be having some connection issues with you, but we'll get back to you. Still doing a sector-by-sector analysis. It's time for me to bring in my studio guest, Dr. Ojan. Now, Dr., let's look at the economy. Okay. When it comes to the economy, President Buhari has implemented several policies and reforms. Could you delve into some of those initiatives and their impact on stimulating economic growth and development? And are there examples of how some of those policies have translated into tangible results in economic growth and prosperity for Nigerians in the last 8 years?
Oh, huge question, if you ask me, in reality. But I think the first thing he did when he came on board was to actually block some of our borders, made a proclamation, call it an executive order.
And yesterday, sorry to interrupt you, Mr. President said Nigerians were very happy with that. Were you part of those Nigerians that were happy with the border closure?
I think there's actually a disconnect between the government performance and the citizens' perception. And this has been on for a very, very long time. For example, there's one strategic thing the government did, and I'm going to talk about it quickly. When this government came on board, I think in 2015, one strategic thing it did was to talk about local production of rice. At that point in time when they came in, we were actually doing up over 1 trillion metric ton per year. But immediately he came in, he was able to reduce that because of the anchor borrower policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria. He empowered some of the farmers and all of that. But here is the question. That does not directly translate into reducing the prices of rice in our market. So when the government is saying, oh, we are performing, the people in the community are saying, we cannot actually feel it. So there's a huge gap between what the government is doing and how the people in the community are actually receiving it. And this could be a result of a whole lot of things. For example, the government can actually say, oh, we have done a lot to actually stabilize the economy, because either we like it or not, we fell into recession at least twice within this administration. Not necessarily because of the inability of the government to actually act. It could be the impact of our long years of reliance on oil. But one thing that the government cannot actually excuse itself from is the fact that the essence of running for office, I have run for office myself, and the essence of doing that is actually to say, oh, this is where you people are, and this is where I want to take you. In fact, it's not even a question of running for office. That's the essence of leadership generally. So if the government
to improve
on what you meant. So if the government meant, for example, the dollar, we're talking about, okay, less than 200 naira on the official market. As we talk now, on the official market, we are having close to 500 naira per dollar. That's talking about naira and dollar exchange rate. So these are some of the questions as to the government has done some basic policies that will have actually improved significantly on the life of Nigerians, but there seems to be that huge gap between what the government thinks it has done and how the Nigerian people are receiving it. Because if you say you're working in any sector and it does not directly translate into reducing poverty in your community, then the people may not see it as such. Nigeria today, thank God that came from the vice president in their first tenure, that close to 100 million people are living under the poverty line. That has not totally improved. But it doesn't mean that the government has actually not expended money in reducing poverty. That's just the gap that I'm concerned about.
Now, when you talk of government expending money in reducing poverty, there's this social safety net scheme where they give the most vulnerable Nigerians cash unconditional cash transfers. Do you think that was a sound policy in helping to reduce poverty, just handing money to people without empowering them, teaching them how to fish,
No,
to use that analogy?
see, there are two strategic implications of that. Number one is that we must also understand what the government meant when it says that he wanted to hand over money to people. The government was not looking at sources of the people. The government was only looking for survivor for the people. So in that instance, you can actually continue to give out money because you just want them to survive. But here is the question mark.
It's a lot of money when you look at it cumulated.
Yes, no, the money didn't even get to the right people. Because I can tell you today now that if you want to judge by the number of people that have bank accounts in Nigeria, just come to my village. And up to today, I want to send money to my people. And these are people who pass through secondary school. They have to look for our neighbor to send their account number to me for me to transfer money to them. It shows that even in not too poor communities, people are not captured in the banking net. So the question has always been, how did you send the money? I engaged the vice president about this. I did a community service where I was giving money to people. And I said, see, I identified people within communities who were reaching out to people genuinely. I thought that the government will pass through these people, but the fear of government also is confirmed in the way we handle the COVID-19 palliative.
Oh, yes.
They gave it to political leaders. Political leaders gave it to some community leaders. Community leaders locked their door against it, and it never got to the people that it was meant for. So I think one very important issue that perhaps the next administration must also learn from is identifying your citizen. Does the government know its citizen? At the moment, the answer is no. And once you continue to lead the people you do not know, lead the people you do not understand, lead the people you do not have pulse, you can't feel the pulse of their feeling, then crises like this will continue in our nation.
Thank you very much, Dotun. And there's talks of a census on the horizon after a 17-year absence. Now, Kingsley Chime, infrastructure development is crucial for a country's progress. Just yesterday, President Muhammadu Buhari, earlier this week, commissioned the second Niger bridge, and he did talk about the various giant strides that his administration did when it comes to infrastructural development in the country. Now, can you provide an analysis of the infrastructure projects undertaken by the Buhari administration, such as rail, roads, air and seaports, and power? How have these projects contributed to the overall development and connectivity of Nigeria?
Thank you, Wenga. It is important for us to appreciate what infrastructural development is all about. It is not limited to a building of bridges or roads. It encompasses both those bridges, roads, hospitals, education, and so on and so forth. However, I understand that Buhari's government, but I have to make this point or this caveat. I'm not anti-government, so that it doesn't look as if I'm being antagonistic. I'm trying to be realistic and speak on specific issues. Second Niger Bridge appears to be the biggest achievement of this government. And quite frankly, I give them credit for that, because I think the second Niger Bridge was awarded towards the tail end of Obasanjo's era. So other successive governments could not follow through that policy, that award, until Buhari took over and almost completed it. So it's a credit on his part. I also understand that there are some other infrastructural developments in our railways, even though it's been grappled with some other issues around it. So these two areas were quite noticeable in this administration, and it's worth commending. However, beyond all of this, Nigeria infrastructure has continued to be on the decline, in the sense that things like hospital or education, health and education, was not given due attention by this government. I recall that in 2015, Muhammadu Buhari promised that he was going to improve on the budgetary allocation of our education from, I think, about 7% to up to 15%. That did not happen. Lecturers of tertiary institutions went on strike several times, running into 8 months or even years. Medical doctors also went on strike. So these are issues. And the implication is that you now see Nigerians emigrating in droves out of Nigeria because they have lost confidence in their own countries. Because if our education is working perfectly, just recently, the United Kingdom announced a policy that would try to restrict movement of Nigerians who are immigrating to UK for educational purposes and all of that. So these are consequences of lack of infrastructure in terms of education and health. Muhammadu Buhari also promised that he was going to improve on our health sector. That did not happen. He is the greatest beneficiary of health sector deficit in Nigeria because he rarely stayed in Nigeria for the first few years of his administration, and he continues to do that. So that will also account on the generality of his performance in terms of infrastructural development. So that is how I see. I believe that some gains were recorded, some minimal gains were recorded. But in the overall, when you compare it to the promises, because I want to hold government accountable based on their own promises. I'm not speaking based on what ought to be or what should be. It is based on what they promise to do. So when you analyze that, you'll be able to have a fair assessment. So I think they have not performed very well. I may give them a pass mark on that regard.
Thank you, Kingsley. Dr. Johnson, quickly, before we go on a break, half-term break, the ease of doing business is essential for economic growth in all countries. Do you see any specific measures that the Buhari administration implemented to make Nigeria a more viable business destination, a conducive environment for business, both local and foreign? And have these reforms attracted foreign investments? Have they stimulated local entrepreneurship? And are there any success stories that highlight the positive outcomes of these reforms? Just earlier this week, the President commissioned the largest single-train petrochemical refinery in the whole world. Would you count this as part of his achievements when it comes to the economy?
Government make serious and strategic attempt in ensuring that we have foreign direct investment in the economy. However, one of the failures of the government with respect to achieving its overall goal with respect to that is the instability that characterizes Naira. Naira happens to be an unstable currency throughout this administration, and foreign investors will not invest in your economy if there is economic instability with respect to the exchange rate of Naira to the dollar. And if you look at the success stories of Dangote refinery, you discover that it's not every businessman in Nigeria that have had that opportunity. If what was provided, the credit facility and the kind of government patronage that are provided for Dangote is provided to all Nigerians. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of areas in which we have seen improvement. We saw when they said that he's paid 70% of the loan and how he had access to exchange rate at official rate. A country that has dual rate, you have dual rate for the exchange of your currency. You have the official rate and then you have the parallel market rate. That itself will not encourage investors to come into your country. There's no doubt the administration made serious attempts to encourage that, but from the monetary point of view, the central bank did not help in terms of providing the stability, the required stability that will make Naira to compete arguably with other currencies all over the world. And to crunch it home is the Naira redesign policy. You know what the dislocation of what the Naira the redesign policy, you know what it costs to the local economy, not to talk of the international economy, and what it costs to many families. So there's one thing, like Kingsley said, it is the promises. It's not that we are bringing out the sword of Damocles on Buhari's administration. It is the promises that were made in 2015. Were those promises kept? Now we are doing an evaluation of the promises made in line with whether these promises are kept, whether they are fulfilled or not. And if you look at it vis-a-vis the promises they make, is you discover that the administration, in terms of encouraging foreign investment, made an attempt, but the policies that we have at home did not actually provide the environment for people to actually want to come and invest in the Nigerian economy, like they will actually want to do.
Thank you very much for your assessment, Dr. Jide Johnson. This is Politics HQ on News Central Television, a fine place to go on a break. And when we return, we'll continue our conversation on the PMB scorecard as we assess the last 8 years of the Buhari administration. Do stay with us. We'll be right back after this quick timeout. You're welcome back to Politics HQ on News Central Television, and we're doing an assessment of the last 8 years of the Buhari administration as it winds down to its tail end. And joining me for this important discussion, I have Dr. Jide Johnson. I also have Kingsley Chime and Dotun Ojon here in the studio with us in Lagos. Now, Dotun, Nigeria used to be one of the, number one oil producer in the war in Africa. We've also seen the Russia-Ukraine conflict push up the price of crude oil, but we've not been able to tap into it and gain from that because of industrial scale theft of this crude oil. Now, looking at the oil and gas sector, it's a vital component of Nigeria's economy. Are there any specific policies or reforms? I believe it was the PIB bill that was introduced, and were there any reforms by the Buhari administration to enhance transparency, increase production, and maximize revenue generation? And could you also shed light on the challenges encountered and the strategies or what the government did to address some of these challenges?
I think we need to be very, very specific about the oil industry. If we never talked about this, it's going to be a very great injustice
and
to the Nigerian people, yes. Because this is one sector that the government actually failed so strongly that everybody in the community can see.
Why do you say so?
Now, because number one, we have a president who similarly understood when he was coming to power.
He's also a petroleum minister, so yes, it's important we mention that.
We actually have a president who similarly understood when he was coming in the industry. But today, all our refineries in Nigeria, we have about 3 or 4 of them. Their capacity is about 500,000 barrels per day, 480-something barrels per day. None of them, as we speak now, is operating in 15% capacity as we speak this morning or today. Now, apart from this, 2 years ago, over $2 billion was actually expended on turnaround maintenance for all the refineries. At the end of the day, nothing came forth. Under the watch of the president, as we speak today, we have roughly about 70% of our crude oil being stolen by people that we cannot identify. And when you talk about crude oil, for some of us who actually understand the sector, who were born in the area, we know that it's not something that an individual can, it's not a venture.
Very technical.
Yes, it's not a venture that an individual will just want to enter and make some quick money. But in all of this, there was something that the president was actually particular about, which was a modular refinery. I thought that would be able to aid local consumption. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. See, in fairness, if you travel across the coast, the west coast, you see that Nigeria is actually selling the lowest when it comes to the price of
heavily subsidized. Yes.
You understand? Because we're talking about subsidy. But in reality, if we were producing for our local consumption, we would not be talking about subsidy because we own the crude and we can deliberately actually cut off dollar in our processes because we want to feed our local economy. And also, Nigeria is complaining about how much they buy fuel today because our life, all of us, is heavily dependent on fuel. all of us, we are tied to it. If you are not using it to grind your pepper, you're using it to power your house. If you are not, we just saw what happened
There's a
to
lot of demand
Dr.
for it.
Jide now. You understand? All of us, we are heavily dependent on this until we have an efficient transport system that you and I do not need to drive almost 12 hours every day. Until we have electricity that an average businessman does not need to actually go out to buy fuel. We'll continue to talk about this petroleum industry. For me, it's actually one sector. I understand the philosophy of this government about infrastructure. And in fact, I have spoken repeatedly that I actually love the fact that this administration is the first administration that will complete ongoing project left behind by its predecessor. We are so notorious that once this administration, in fact, in the same party, if we belong to the same party, if I start a project and I don't complete it, we saw what happened in Lagos, that there were projects that were started by Fashola, but they refused to complete
Cross
it.
River State
and a lot
2
of
is a fantastic example.
Yes, so
yes.
This government, when it comes to infrastructure, I give it to them. But on the issue of this sector, the sector that the president presides over, the sector that the president understands, I never knew that we are going to end this tenure.
Now,
like
the
this.
positives, militancy in the Niger Delta and the NDDC, don't you see it as something positive that we don't hear reports of attacks and pipelines and all of that?
Okay,
you wouldn't give the president credit for that.
Let's begin with NDDC. NDDC actually started, before it was renamed, before the ADA renamed it to NDDC. NDDC actually started in 1993. It was called OMPADEC, Oil Mineral Producing Area Development Commission. And over the years, what they've done is to have said, we are an interventionist agency. We want to intervene and develop areas with perhaps issues, crude oil issues, and all of that. But the reality is that NDDC is not the brainchild of this government. In fact, I would say, without missing word, that NDDC performed more excellently before this government came to power. Now we even have the Ministry of Niger Delta, and there's a big tussle. If you understand the politics of oil, a big tussle between the Niger Delta Ministry and the NDDC. People are going back and forth. What is the result of the forensic audit that was actually carried out on NDDC? We have not seen people being sent to jail. These are some of the implications. So the government was able to maintain the amnesty program.
Yes.
A lot of our people were actually sent back to the university. At least in Nigeria, we have about 6 universities populated by the Niger Delta. That's fantastic. They were able to actually sustain that. For me, which is also an extension of what I said earlier, the ability of the government to sustain the policies and the project of its predecessor.
It's a positive.
But that has not had a direct impact on the majority of the Nigerian people.
Okay.
Going by the fact that they now buy fuel higher than they used to buy it, they now have to depend on fuel more than they ever. As we speak now, we are giving out less than 5,000 megawatts of electricity as again the promise of the government to actually turn around the sector.
And of course, fuel scarcity has not been a thing of the past, like Nigeria's witnessed in the run-up to the elections this year. Now, moving on from the oil sector, Kingsley, you did talk on this issue. I'm talking about education and healthcare in your opening statement. Now, education and healthcare are crucial sectors for development, for social development. Can you elaborate on the government's efforts to improve these sectors? What policies or programs did the Buhari administration implement, and what outcomes have they achieved in terms of quality education and accessibility of health for Nigerians? And let's also look at the great disruption, the great disruptor. It happens once in a lifetime. COVID-19, the whole world had to shut down. How was Nigeria's response? It happened under the Buhari administration. How would you score the president and his administration's response to the COVID-19 pandemic? Kingsley.
Thank you so much, Mr. Buenga. Like I did say in my introduction, that some of these areas are part of key performance indices or indicators within which to assess this government. I understand that, like I said earlier, that COVID-19 was indeed a disruptor, not only in Nigeria, but across the globe. How we're able to, manage and survive that phase was a miracle, so to say. It really had nothing to do with government intervention or policies at the time. In fact, we are witnesses here, like one of your guests has stated, where there were palliatives by not just from Nigeria, but international community to cushion the effect of this COVID-19. And we saw how politicians, began to commercialize some of these palliatives. So how we survived was an act of God. It was not based on the policy of government or their own intervention. Of course, we were barely following the international trend at the time, both on the drugs from America and all those mechanisms through which to avoid contacting the disease. So for me, it has nothing to do with government.
But are you, Kingsley, are you not being too critical here? Because remember the NCDC's response. They always provided open communication and daily updates on the disease. And it's something that a lot of Nigerians have pointed to say, you know what, this is very commendable. Don't you see that we were spared the worst? Don't you think it was deliberate? It was a deliberate effort for the government, or you think it's just mere luck or an act of God?
Well, I don't want to sound so pessimistic. I have said that here that how we survived that COVID-19 remains a mystery or act of God. I didn't. I know what I was saying. Of course, the NDC was giving us records of people that contacted the disease, and even tracking them at the initial stage of the disease.
Hello, Kingsley. I think we've lost Kingsley's communication there. I'd like to bring in Dr. Jide back into this conversation. Now, Dr. Johnson, the creative industry. I mean, Nigeria's celebrates the ambassadors worldwide and the contribution to its GDP. The creative industry and sports, they have immense potential for economic growth and cultural preservation. I'm sure you agree with me on this. What notable achievements can be attributed to the Buhari administration in these sectors? How have they been supported, and what impact have they had on job creation, cultural promotion, and international recognition? How have we done? Some supporters of the government will point to, Victor Osimhen winning the Serie A title. They'll look at Burna Boy's Grammy-winning achievements. They'll say, all these things happened, and the record-breaking feats of Nigerian creatives. Can the government claim some responsibility for that? And what do you make of all of this? Creative industry and sports. How did the Buhari administration perform?
There's no doubt that the president identified with Nigerian successes in sport, music, and entertainment, both local, global, and in diaspora. No doubt about that this administration laid claims to it. But that does not exist in isolation. I think that the move towards the creative industry in Nigeria started with Obasanjo administration. We know the support that Obasanjo administration provided for Kenny's music, the role that Kenny's music plays in what has happened to Nigerian musical industry, and then the promotion of our culture with respect to using African fabric and wearing African fabric and promoting African culture. So, however, this administration identified with all of Nigerians in sport, music, and in the entertainment industry. However, if you look at it from a local point of view, what kind of platform have been provided for people that work in the creative industry in terms of, I've said it, take away sports from the American society, take away music and entertainment from the American society. What do you think we have put to the majority of African Americans in this society? Do you think you have somebody like LeBron James, or you have somebody like Michael Jackson, or you have somebody like Kevin Durant, or all of those sports stars? And what we need to do is to domesticate this. Thank God for those Nigerians that have broken through. We have millions of talents, and it's high time that government at the national level, and that's one area in which you should commend Lagos State government in terms of identifying and relating with the creative industry. No doubt about that. Delta State government as well. These are two states that have identified and related with the creative industry, and I think Akwa Ibom State too. And then you recall under Donald Duke in Cross River states with the Calabar Carnival and the rest of it. Because there's a lot of things we could make in terms of foreign exchange earning, in terms of breaking through poverty, and in terms of reducing the crime rate in the society when we make serious investment in the creative industry. Because in the creative industry, you can just wake up today and tomorrow you become a millionaire. If you begin to mention names, like we just don't want to do advert for all of these artists and for all of these people. If you begin to mention names, you begin to see that how people have been able to break the backbone of poverty through their creative talent, through their various talents across board. And the incoming administration, the reason why we are doing this postmortem is to provide a direction for the incoming administration to look at where this outgoing administration has failed and where they can come in. So we have not come to criticize the government, but we have come to do an evaluation so that those that are coming in can look at areas of strength and areas of weakness of the outgoing administration, and they can invest in those areas so that this country can go. Every Nigerian wants this country to succeed, and there's no doubt that we need to invest. Just imagine if there was no National Sport Festival, nobody will hear of Akim Olajuwon. Akim Olajuwon participated in 1981 National Sports Festival in Oyo State, playing basketball and handball. And today, if you are talking about NBA Hall of Fame, Akim Olajuwon is a product of that National Sports Festival. You talk about Victor Osimhen. Victor Osimhen played locally before he made his breakthrough. JJ Okocha, Victor Ipebak, Nnamdi Kanu. You know, when Nigeria now resort to bringing Nigerian diaspora to play for the national team, that's where we are not succeeding. Have you seen that? That
very
when
true,
we are now starting
looking
for Nigerian, we are not succeeding. However, when we are relying on our local talent that grow within Nigerian economy, that grow within Nigerian society, before going abroad to sharpen their skill and their talent, we are making successes. And that tells you that there is an unhidden goal in Nigeria. It's for government to make investment in this particular sector. Look at what Whiskey, Davido, Burna Boy, Victor Osimhen. If you go to Napoli and they see you are a Nigerian, what do you think the Napolitans will do to you? They welcome you with open hands. So these are the areas in which you are looking for government to look into. Because take away Premier League from the English society, take away NBA, take away NFL, take away sports from the American society, take away music and entertainment. What do you think will happen to those society? And that's a critical area in which government can invest, and you can get foreign exchange earning, and you can save a lot of people from poverty, and you can get a lot of youth to be employed.
Very true. Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson. Now, Barrister Chime, as we wrap up this conversation, a new administration will be birthed in a matter of days. What are your expectations of this administration, and what areas, what crucial areas should be prioritized?
Having analyzed the failures and successes, if any, of this government that is about to wind up, I think it's incumbent on the incoming government to borrow a leaf and improve on where there are improvement or successes, and then to have a rethink or a rejig in those areas where this government has been found wanting. But one thing is very key. Nigeria has never been disunited like it is today, based on the aftermath of the 2023 general election. So this government must begin on reconciliation, because if there is no unity of purpose, Nigeria cannot make progress. Some persons will begin to undermine whatever little progress the government wants to make. So the next government must have it as a cardinal or focal point to ensure that every Nigerian was brought on board, and ensure that what happened in 2015 to 2023 do not reoccur when it has to do with nepotism. Nigeria became, the center of nepotism in terms of appointment. There was no national spread because of who voted for you or who did not vote for you. Once you win an election, you become the president of the entire country and not a section of the country. So we must see you being for everyone and for no one, not just in words, but in action.
On that note, I would like to say thank you, a big thank you to you gentlemen, Kingsley Chime, Dr. Ojon and Dr. Jide Johnson, for your fine analysis and insights on this subject. It was a pleasure having you all join me tonight on Politics HQ. Thank you.
To Benga and our viewers all over the world.
Thank you. Watching Politics HQ, it's time for me to give you something to chew after this break.